Jace Miller had never been this nervous in his life. He had been through intense training, rigorous space missions, and countless encounters with alien species, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. He was about to meet the Vathrians, a race of towering ancient beings who had never been fully open to human contact. The future of humanity's expansion into the galaxy rested on his shoulders, and he could feel the weight of that responsibility pressing down on him. Jace stood at the edge of the docking bay, staring at the alien landscape of Vathra Prime. The planet's surface was covered in dark, jagged mountains and deep ravines, with towering structures made of black stone that glowed faintly under the twin moons. The air was thin but breathable, though it carried a strange scent, a mix of something floral and something metallic. His mission was simple: establish a diplomatic relationship with the Vathrians. The fate of humanity's future in this part of the galaxy depended on it. But Jace didn't know if diplomacy was going to be enough. He had heard stories about the Vathrians, how they were fierce, prideful, and incredibly suspicious of outsiders, especially humans. He took a deep breath, adjusting the collar of his uniform. His crew was gathered behind him, all standing in respectful silence as they prepared to meet their Vathrian counterparts. The shuttle door opened with a soft hiss, and Jace stepped forward. A few steps into the bay, he found himself face to face with the Vathrians. They were nothing like the peaceful, scholarly beings he had imagined. Instead, they were tall, their bodies covered in muscle, and their skin shimmered with an otherworldly indigo hue. Their eyes glowed with a golden light that seemed to pierce right through him. The leader of the group, a woman who was easily a head taller than Jace, stepped forward with a calm but commanding presence. Her eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, he felt like he was being judged. "I am Zara, diplomat of the Vathrian people," the woman said, her voice deep, cold, and unwavering. "And you must be the human emissary." Jace nodded, trying his best to hide his nervousness. "Yes, I am Jace Miller." "It's an honor to meet you, Zara." Zara didn't respond with a smile or any sign of warmth. Instead, she stared at him, her golden eyes narrowed slightly. She seemed to be studying him, perhaps deciding if he was worthy of her time. In an attempt to break the ice, Jace did what he thought was a harmless gesture. He tried to be charming, as he had done countless times before when meeting with new species. "Hey, beauty queen," he said, grinning a little. The words were out of his mouth before he could stop them. Immediately, the atmosphere grew tense. Zara's eyes flashed with something fierce, something Jace couldn't quite place. It wasn't humor or understanding. It was pure, unfiltered anger. "Watch your mouth, human," Zara snapped, her voice. Like a whip crack through the air, Jack froze, taken aback by her sudden outburst. His heart skipped a beat, his mouth going dry. What had just happened? He had been trying to be friendly, but now he realized that humor didn't translate the same way with the Vathrians. Her words were sharp and cutting. There was no mistaking the disdain in her voice. Jace quickly straightened up, embarrassment flooding his cheeks. He had made a serious mistake. I'm sorry," Jace stammered, trying to recover. "I didn't mean any disrespect. It was just a way of being friendly." Zara's gaze didn't soften. Instead, she took a slow step closer, towering over him, her presence overwhelming. "Your kind doesn't know how to be friendly," she said, her voice almost a growl. "You are weak, impulsive, and often disrespectful. I will not tolerate such behavior." The other Vathrians behind her said nothing, their faces unreadable. But Jace could feel their eyes on him, and he knew that Zara wasn't the only one judging him. His mission was already off to a terrible start. Jace's heart raced faster now, his breath quickening as the tension in the air grew thick. This was nothing like the calm negotiations he had imagined. He had expected some cultural differences, but this level of hostility was far beyond what he'd prepared for. He had to fix this. He had to win Zara's trust somehow. He cleared his throat and spoke again, trying to steady his voice. "I understand that humans are new to your people. We're eager to learn. I wasn't trying to offend you. I just thought I could make the introduction a bit lighter." Zara seemed to consider his words for a moment, her eyes scanning him, weighing his sincerity. Finally, she spoke again, her voice quieter but still firm. Humans have a long history of failure when it comes to interacting with other species. She paused, as if contemplating something deeper. You may not know it, but there are those who believe your kind will bring nothing but chaos to this galaxy. That you are a threat to order. Jace nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He knew that there were many factions in the galaxy who viewed humanity as dangerous, especially considering the wars and conflicts they had gone through in their own history. But he wasn't here to talk about the past, he was here to build something new, to make sure humanity's future wouldn't be defined by their mistakes. I know that humans have made mistakes, he said carefully, but we are trying to change. We want peace and cooperation, not conflict. I understand that it will take time to earn your trust, but I promise you, Zara, we are here for the right reasons. Instead, she gave a curt nod and turned to one of the Vathrians standing behind her, signaling for him to lead them to the meeting hall. She didn't offer a smile, nor any form of reassurance. Her face remained an emotionless mask. Jace watched her walk away, his heart still pounding in his chest. What had he gotten himself into? The rest of the day passed in a blur of tense silence. As the group moved from one meeting to another, Jace tried to stay calm and professional, but the encounter with Zara lingered in his mind. Every time he caught her gaze, he felt his stomach tighten. She was beautiful in a way that was almost intimidating, but that was the least of his worries. It was the hostility in her eyes, the unspoken challenge that left him unsure of how to approach her. He had come to Vathra Prime to secure an alliance, to bring hope for humanity's future in this part of the galaxy. But now, he wasn't sure if he had the slightest chance of winning Zara over, as they finally sat down to discuss the specifics of their potential partnership. Jace found himself struggling to focus. His mind kept drifting back to her words. Her gaze, the anger that burned in her eyes. The negotiations were far from over, and Jace couldn't afford to make another mistake. But as he looked at Zara, sitting across from him, her expression unreadable, one thing was certain. This mission was going to be far more difficult than he had ever imagined. The following day, Jace woke up to the sound of the city's strange hum. Vathra Prime wasn't like Earth, where everything was familiar and comforting. Here, everything was differentalian and cold. The air felt thinner, but still breathable, and the towering structures outside his window loomed over him like silent giants. Jace rubbed his eyes, trying to shake off the feeling that he was constantly being watched. Today, he was scheduled to meet Zara again. After the disastrous first meeting, he had no idea how things would go. The tension from their last encounter still lingered in his mind. It was clear that Zara didn't trust him, and that mistrust extended to every human in the room. He had to find a way to show her he was sincere, that humanity had changed, that they weren't the same reckless species the Vathrians remembered. He quickly got dressed and joined the rest of the crew for breakfast, but his thoughts kept wandering. Back to Zara. What would she expect from him today? More apologies? More promises? He wasn't sure, but he knew he couldn't afford another mistake. Soon enough, a member of the Vathrian delegation arrived at the door of his quarters. The tall alien, whose name Jace hadn't yet learned, spoke in a low, gravelly voice. Come. The ceremony begins soon. Jace followed the alien, trying to mask his nerves. As they walked through the wide corridors of the Vathrian embassy, Jace couldn't help but notice the intricate carvings on the walls' depictions of great battles. Ancient heroes and the history of the Vathrian people, their entire culture, was steeped in honor and strength. It was clear that for the Vathrians, weakness was not tolerated. The thoughts filled him with a sinking feeling in his stomach. When they arrived at the main hall, Zara was already there, standing tall and proud at the head of a small gathering. Her golden eyes met his as he entered, and for a brief moment, the tension between them seemed to crackle in the air. Human. Zara's voice was steady, but there was no warmth in it. You claim to seek peace. But we will see if your kind is worthy of our trust. Jace straightened his back, trying to hide the nervous flutter in his chest. I'm ready for anything, he said, keeping his tone even. I'll do whatever it takes. Zara nodded slightly and stepped aside, revealing a wide, circular arena in the center of the hall was surrounded by raised platforms where Vathrians stood watching. The floor of the arena was made of smooth black stone that shimmered under the dim lights. The atmosphere felt almost ceremonial, as if Jace had walked into some ancient ritual. His mind raced. "This is the test of strength," Zara explained, "a Vathrian tradition. If you are to be taken seriously, you must prove yourself capable. Strong and worthy of our respect." Jace's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't anticipated anything like this. He had heard that the Vathrians valued strength, but this was a trial he wasn't prepared for. I don't understand. What exactly do I have to do?" Jace asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Zara's lips curled into a faint smile, though there was no humor in it. "You will fight." A chill ran down Jace's spine. "Fight," he repeated, his voice quieter than before. "Yes." Zara's gaze was sharp. "You will face my warriors. To prove your worth. If you survive, we will consider your mission." Jace glanced around the room at the towering Vathrians standing on the raised platforms. They were all watching him, their eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Some of them looked amused. Jace felt small, fragile in comparison to the massive muscular beings around him. Zara pointed to the center of the arena. "A step forward. Choose your weapon." Jace swallowed hard, his mind racing. He was no fighter. Sure, he'd had basic training as part of his astronaut program, but nothing like this. He had never fought a warrior species like the Vathrians. Still, he couldn't back down. He had no choice but to face the test. He stepped into the arena, trying to keep his composure. A Vathrian servant approached, holding out a variety of weapon swords, spears, and strange, and curved blades that Jace had never seen before. He chose a basic sword, hoping that it would give him some chance of survival. Zara gestured to one of her warriors, a tall Vathrian with a scar running across his face, who stepped forward. He was dressed in battle armor, his eyes cold and focused. His muscles bulged under the armor, and his posture exuded confidence. The warrior raised his weapon along, gleaming spear, and smirked. "You will face him first, human," Zara said, her voice almost like a challenge. "Let us see if you can withstand the strength of the Vathrians." The warrior lunged without warning.
Ouch.
Jace barely had time to react. He swung the sword instinctively, but the Vathrian was too fast, parrying the blow with ease. Jace staggered back, trying to keep his balance. His mind was racing. He had to stay alive. There was no room for hesitation. The warrior came at him again, this time with a swift, powerful strike. Jace barely managed to dodge, the spear grazing his side and leaving a shallow cut. Pain shot through his body, but he gritted his teeth, refusing to give up. He had to show Zara that humans weren't weak. He tried to strike back, but the Vathrian warrior was too skilled, easily sidestepping his clumsy attempts. The crowd watched in silence, their eyes fixed on the fight. Jace's breath came in ragged gasps. His muscles burned, his arms felt heavy, and his vision began to blur. He was losing, but then something inside him clicked. He couldn't afford to lose. Not here. Not now. With a surge of adrenaline, Jace changed his approach. Instead of focusing on power, he began to use his agility, his ability to think on his feet. The Vathrian warrior came at him again, but this time Jace ducked low, spinning out of the way and delivering a quick strike to the warrior's unguarded side. It wasn't much, but it was enough to throw the warrior off balance. The crowd gasped, and Zara's eyes widened slightly. Jace could see that he had caught her attention. He wasn't just a weak human. He was resourceful, adaptable. The Vathrian warrior recovered quickly, but now he was cautious. Jace pressed his advantage, moving faster, his strikes more precise. Finally, with one last well-timed blow, Jace disarmed the warrior. Sending his spear flying across the arena, the silence in the room was deafening. Jace stood, breathing heavily, his sword raised in victory. His heart was pounding in his chest. The warrior, though clearly surprised, gave a respectful nod before stepping back. Zara's expression remained stoic, but her golden eyes gleamed with something like approval. "Well done, human." Her voice was quiet, but there was a hint of respect in it now. You have passed the first test, but there is more to come. Jace nodded, his body still trembling from the exertion. He had survived the first test. He knew that this was just the beginning. He had to prove himself worthy of Zara's trust and of the future alliance between their people. Jace stood in the center of the arena, his chest heaving as he wiped the sweat from his brow.
Oh.
The roar of the crowd around him had faded into a low hum in his ears.
Oh.
His body ached, his muscles burning from the intense fight with the Vathrin. Warrior. He had passed the first test, but now the real challenge began. Zara's eyes never left him. She had stood quietly at the edge of the arena, observing his every move. Her face was still a mask of stoic indifference, but Jace had caught the brief flicker of approval in her gaze. It was small, almost unnoticeable, but it was enough to tell him that he hadn't completely failed. "You have done well, human," Zara's voice echoed across the arena, cutting through the silence. "But strength is not enough to win. Respect. The next test is one of courage." Jace felt a chill run down his spine. He had expected more physical challenges, but courage. What did that mean in the eyes of the Vathrians? Zara raised her hand, signaling for the arena to clear. The other Vathrians watching stepped back, creating a wide space around the two of them. One of the Vathrian servants stepped forward with a strange glowing orb. The orb was about the size of a football, and it pulsed with an eerie blue light. It floated just above the servant's hands, moving as if guided by an invisible force. "This," Zara said, gesturing to the orb, "is the trial of courage. You must enter the orb of nightmares." Jace stared at the orb, confusion written across his face. What is it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "It is a gateway into your deepest fears," Zara explained, her voice hard as stone. "The orb will bring forth your greatest nightmares. You will face them. You must stand firm and overcome them." Jace felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Facing his fears, that was not something he had ever signed up for. He'd been ready for a fight, even if it was tough, but this was different. The unknown terrified him. And if he failed, it wasn't just his pride on the line. He knew that the future of humanity's relationship with the Vathrians was at risk. But he couldn't back down now. Not after everything he had gone through, not after surviving the first trial. He stepped forward, the sharp sound of his boots echoing across the silent arena. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the orb, the cold energy from within. It sending a shiver down his spine. As soon as his fingers brushed against it, a rush of cold air blasted through the arena, and everything around him vanished. The world became dark. He couldn't see anything, only hear the steady beating of his heart, the rush of blood in his ears. It felt as if he were floating in space, untethered, alone. And then, slowly, images began to form. Ghostly shapes danced in the darkness. Twisted, shifting figures that seemed to pulse with an unnatural life. Jace's heart raced. This was at the nightmares. He stood frozen, unable to move, as a figure slowly emerged from the shadows. It was a man, tall and lean, with dark eyes that seemed to pierce through him. His face was covered in a dark hood, and his voice was a low, menacing whisper. "You think you can survive this, human?" The figure mocked, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You are nothing but a weakling, a failure. You'll never be enough." Jace felt a cold sweat break out on his skin. His pulse quickened. The words hit harder than he expected. They dug deep into his insecurities, things he had never allowed himself to feel. He remembered his early days in the academy, struggling to keep up with the other cadets. Always feeling like he wasn't strong enough, not smart enough, not good enough. He had always been average, never the best, never the worst, always just getting by. But deep down, he had always feared that wasn't enough, that he would never be more than ordinary. The figure took a step closer, his face now inches from Jace's. "You will fail, just like you failed in your last mission." The figure sneered. "You got your crew killed. You're a burden to them." You're staggered. Back, gasping for breath. The memories flooded back of the failed mission on Zalvernine, where a simple mistake had cost the lives of two of his closest friends. He had been the one in charge, and he had failed them. The guilt had haunted him for months. He had never been able to fully forgive himself for it. No, no, he whispered, his voice trembling. I did the best I could. I wasn't the only one at fault. The figure laughed, the sound echoing in the darkness. Excuses. You've always had excuses. But deep down, you know the truth. You're a failure. You always will be. Jace's breath came in ragged gasps now, panic rising in his chest. He could feel the weight of the words pressing on him, suffocating him. His knees wobbled, and for a moment he felt like he might collapse. But then he stopped. He paused, he remembered. Something his mother had once told him. Strength is not measured by the battles you win, but by how you face your losses. The words rang in his mind, steadying him. He wasn't going to let this nightmare control him. Not again. With a deep breath, Jace stood taller, forcing himself to meet the figure's eyes. I'm not a failure, he said, his voice growing. Stronger, I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. But I've learned from them, and I won't let them define me. The figure sneered one last time before it began to fade, its form dissolving into the shadows. The darkness around Jace lifted, and the eerie whispers fell silent. The world around him started to come back into focus, and he found himself standing in the middle of the arena once more. Zara stood at the edge, her expression unreadable as she watched him. The other Vathrians remained silent, their eyes fixed. On him, the air felt heavy, as though they were waiting for something. Jace's heart pounded in his chest. Had he passed? Had he done enough? Then Zara spoke, her voice cutting through the tense silence. You have faced your fear and come out stronger. She took a step forward, her eyes never leaving his. You are not as weak as I thought, human. But this trial is not over. Jace's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Zara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned and gestured to the vast expanse of the arena behind her. The final test awaits. Jace blinked, the weight of her words sinking in. He had passed the trial of courage, but what came next? Out. Whatever it was, he knew it would push him even further. He wasn't ready to fail now. He had come too far. But one thing was certain. He would face whatever came. Next, with the same resolve, the same courage. He couldn't afford to stop now. Jace's heart thudded in his chest as Zara's words echoed in the arena. The final test awaits. The air seemed to grow heavier, the tension between him and the Vathrians thickening. He had passed the first two trials, strength and courage. But now, what was this final test that Zara had hinted at? She turned away without further explanation, gesturing for him to follow. Jace didn't hesitate. He knew better than to question Zara now. After everything he had endured, after facing down his own fears, he had to see this through to the end. Whatever the Vathrians had in store for him. He couldn't back down. The path ahead led deeper into the vast complex of the Vathrian arena. Unlike the grand open spaces Jace had seen before, this corridor was narrow and dark, the walls lined with strange glowing symbols. There was an almost oppressive silence that hung in the air. The only sound was the soft thud of his boots on the floor and the quiet hum of distant machinery. Zara led the way without speaking, her movements swift and purposeful. Jace followed closely, his mind racing. He had already faced physical challenges and mental trials. What more could they possibly demand from him? Finally, they reached a large chamber. The walls were made of polished stone, and a great circular platform stood in the center. The chamber was dimly lit, but the light that did exist flickered, like firelight casting long, eerie shadows across the room. Jace took a step into the center of the room. And suddenly, the door behind him slammed shut with a deafening noise. His heart skipped. He turned to see the door sealed tight, an invisible barrier keeping him inside. Zara stood on the edge of the platform, her eyes cold and unblinking. She nodded once, her voice steady as she spoke. This is the trial of the mind. Jace froze. His stomach dropped. A mental trial? This was different. The physical tests had been challenging. But this felt like something deeper, something far more personal. The trial of the mind is unlike anything you've faced. It will test your intelligence, your ability to think under pressure, and most of all, it will test your understanding of what you value. You will face scenarios designed to force you into difficult decisions. Your choice will determine your success or failure. Jace swallowed hard, trying to suppress the panic rising in his chest. He had been prepared for physical trials, but mental challenges like this? It was a whole new kind of pressure. Zara's golden eyes locked onto his. Do not hesitate. The clock will tick, and failure is not an option. Jace took a deep breath, trying to steady his mind. He had to focus. This was no longer about brute strength or overcoming fear. This was about using his mind, his ability, to make decisions in moments of extreme pressure. He had to keep his cool. Without another word, Zara stepped aside, revealing a large holographic screen that flickered to life in front of him. On it, Jace saw a series of images each, one flashing in rapid succession, so fast that he could barely make out the details. As they cycled through, his mind raced to process what he was seeing. Suddenly, the screen froze on a single image. Family of Vathrians, standing together in front of a massive city. The father, tall and proud. The mother, a graceful figure, and two children, one looking uncertain, the other smiling happily. The image seemed so real, so lifelike. But as Jace stared, the image began to distort. A voice echoed through the chamber, speaking in the same low, gravelly tone that had accompanied the first two trials. You must choose. The voice continued, its tone growing darker with every word. The city will be destroyed unless you choose. Save the family or save the city. You have only one choice. You cannot save both. Time is running out. Choose. Jace felt his heart race. This wasn't a question of physical strength or courage, it was a test of his very soul. The family on the screen, they looked so real. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him. How could he choose between a family and a city? The images of the family flickered again. This time, showing the father's face twisted in agony, the mother reaching out toward a city that was beginning to crumble. The children's expressions were filled with fear. Time is almost up. Choose human. The voice boomed. JC's single quotes, his breath quickened as he ran through every possible solution. The logical part of him told him that the city was bigger, it represented the future of his people. But the emotional part of him screamed to save the family. They were real. They were alive, and he could feel their pain, their fear. He couldn't just let them die. But then another voice whispered in the back of his mind. The voice of his mentor back on Earth. A true leader doesn't just make decisions based on emotion. A true leader makes the choice that will ensure the survival of the many, not the few. He clenched his fists, the pressure mounting. The seconds seemed to stretch on for hours. He glanced at Zara, her face unreadable as she watched him. There was no going back. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jace stepped forward and spoke firmly. Save the city. The screen flickered, and the image of the family vanished. The city appeared again, and the holographic image shifted, showing how it was saved from the impending disaster. Jace exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The voice returned, now calm. A wise choice. You have shown the ability to think logically and with compassion. But remember this. Human decisions always come with consequences. The platform beneath Jace's feet began to glow brighter, and the room seemed to shift. The next scenario appeared on the screen, faster than the first. This time, it was a battlefield, and he could see soldiers, wounded and scattered. One soldier stood tall in the middle, his face a mix of determination and fear. The voice came again, as steady as ever. You must now choose again. The soldier before you will die if you do not act. But if you save him, the rest of your team will be sacrificed. Jace's heart sank. Again, he was forced to choose between one life and many. He looked at the soldier, his expression resolute, his hands gripping his weapon. And yet the choice seemed impossible. This trial was harder than the last. It wasn't just about saving the many, it was about saving one. Was one life worth the price of the others? Jace's mind spun, trying to find a way out. But the clock was ticking. He closed his eyes, trying to think of something his mother had told him. Long ago, the hardest choices are never black and white. Act! You must act with your heart and mind, not just one or the other. He knew what he had to do. Opening his eyes, he looked at the soldier on the screen, his mind made up. Jace pressed the button to save the soldier. The voice spoke once more, this time with a deep, satisfied tone. Why do you have passed the trial of the mind? You have proven your intelligence and your ability to think under pressure. But remember, the choices you make will always have consequences. As the chamber returned to its original state, Jace took a deep breath. His head throbbed from the mental strain, but he had passed. He had done what he thought was right. Now, only one thing remained. Zara stepped forward, her expression unreadable as always. You have completed the final test, human. You have shown strength, courage, and wisdom. You may now speak with us as an equal. Jace exhaled, his legs feeling weak beneath him. He had made it. He had survived. And now he could finally stand with the Vathrians on equal ground. But as he looked at Zara, he knew that his journey was far from over. There was still much to do. He had passed the tests. But what awaited him next would be the true test of whether humanity could truly join the Vathrians on their path to peace. Jace stood still, his breath steadying, but his heart still pounded in his chest. He had passed the trial of the mind, the final test the Vathrians had set for him. The pressure, the decisions, the weight of each moment had been overwhelming, but he had made it through. He had proven himself, or so he thought. Zara stood in front of him, her face as unreadable as ever, but her golden eyes held a certain glint. She had watched him carefully, measured his every move, his every decision. She was waiting for something. But Jace didn't know what. You have completed the trials, human, Zara said, her voice as cold and composed as ever. But the question remains, do you truly understand what you have done? Jace frowned. What did she mean? Hadn't he passed? Hadn't he done everything they asked? What do you mean? He asked, his voice firm but still carrying the exhaustion of the tests. Zara's gaze softened, just slightly. You have proven your strength, your courage, and your wisdom. But now, the true trial begins. Jace's heart skipped. The true trial. Zara stepped closer, the quiet hum of the arena now, a distant background noise. The Vathrians do not accept just anyone into our fold. You have passed the trials of strength, courage, and intellect. But there is one more test, and it is not something you can prepare for. It is a test of conviction. Jace's mind raced.
What was she talking about?
Conviction? Hadn't he already shown his determination by completing the trials? He wasn't sure if he could handle another test. He was already drained, physically, mentally, emotionally. But if this was the final hurdle, he had no choice but to face it. Zara didn't wait for his answer. Instead, she turned and gestured for him to follow. They walked deeper into the heart of the arena, past the stone walls that felt colder with. Each step, the corridors grew narrower, the air heavier, as though the space itself was alive with anticipation. Finally, they arrived at a large open space, much larger than the arena where Jace had first fought. This chamber was illuminated by strange glowing crystals embedded in the ceiling, casting eerie shadows across the ground. In the center of the room stood an enormous stone pedestal, and upon it rested a single object, a glowing orb, pulsating with an otherworldly light. Jace's eyes widened. The orb was like nothing he had ever seen before. Its glow seemed to shift in color blue, green, purple-each hue, changing as the light flickered. What is that? Jace asked, his voice barely a whisper. Zara's eyes never left the orb. That is the orb of truth. It holds the final test for you, human. It will reveal to you the truth of your heart. Jace took a step forward, but Zara raised a hand to stop him. You must be ready. The orb will show you things. It will show you your deepest fears, your greatest regrets, and your hidden desires. You must face them all. Jace swallowed hard, his throat dry. He had already faced so much his fears, his failures, Could he handle more? The thought of facing his innermost secrets terrified him, but he knew he had no choice. He had come too far to turn back. With a deep breath, he nodded. "I'm ready." Zara gave him a single solemn nod before stepping aside. "Then go ahead." Jace approached the pedestal cautiously, his eyes locked on the glowing orb. The closer he got, the more it seemed to pull him in. His heart raced, and he could feel the sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. This was it. The final test. He reached out, his hand trembling as he placed it on the orb. The moment his fingers touched its surface, a jolt of energy shot through his body. His vision blurred, and the world around him began to dissolve. Suddenly, he was no longer standing in the chamber. He was somewhere else, somewhere dark. He couldn't see anything, but he could hear the sound of breathing. His breathing was shallow, fast, panicked. The air was thick and heavy, suffocating him. He reached out, trying to steady himself. But his hands found nothing but empty air. Then, a voice deep, familiar spoke from the darkness. Jace. His heart lurched. It was a voice he had heard countless times before. It was the voice of his mentor, Captain Michael Shaw, the same man who had trained him, who had taken him under his wing when he was just a rookie. The same man who had died. "On that fateful mission on Zalvar 9, you failed me, Jace. You failed us all." The voice was filled with pain and accusation, and Jace felt his heart break all over again. The weight of that day, the guilt, the regret, it all came rushing back. "I didn't mean to fail, Mike. I tried. I really tried." Jace's voice was shaky, but he couldn't stop himself from speaking. The darkness around him seemed to grow, suffocating him. He could feel the cold, the emptiness of the void. It failed Mike. He had failed his team. It failed himself. "You think you can fix it now? You think you're worthy of redemption?" The voice mocked him, and Jace's knees buckled. He wanted to scream, to shout, but no words came. Only a deep, empty silence. Then the voice softened, almost to a whisper. "But maybe you're not as broken as you think." Jace's eyes snapped open. He was back in the chamber, standing before the orb. The room was silent, the crystal lights casting soft shadows across the walls. Zara stood to the side. Watching him closely, Jace took a deep breath, his chest heavy with emotion. The memories, the pain, they still lingered. But now he understood. The guilt he had carried with him for so long, it wasn't something he could undo. Define him either. The mistakes, the loss, the regret, it was part of who he was. But it didn't have to be the end of his story. Zara's voice broke through his thoughts. "You have faced the truth of your heart, human." Her gaze was steady, assessing him. "You have learned what it means to carry the weight of your choices. But more importantly, you have learned how to move forward, to rise above your past." Jace nodded slowly, his eyes now focused. "I'm not perfect. I never will be. But I can still choose what I do next." Zara's expression softened for the first time. "Yes, you can. And that is why you are worthy." Jace exhaled, the weight in his chest lifting just a little. He had made it through. He had completed the trials. But more importantly, he had come to terms with who he was, not just the soldier, not just the leader, but a man with flaws, with mistakes, and with the power to choose his future. Zara stepped forward, her eyes still fixed on him. "The Vathrians do not take in those who are weak, human. But you, Jace, have shown strength in ways we have not seen in others. You have earned our respect. You are no longer an outsider." Jace's heart swelled with pride. He had done it. He had proved that humanity could be more than just a species fighting to survive. They could stand alongside the Vathrians, not as equals in power, but as equals in spirit. "Thank you, Zara." Jace's voice was filled with gratitude, but it was also filled with a new sense of purpose. He had faced the hardest challenges of his life, and he had emerged stronger for it. "Now," Zara continued, her tone shifting slightly, "the true work begins. There are more trials ahead, more decisions to make. The future of your people depends on what you do next. Will you rise to meet that challenge?" Jace's eyes met hers. He didn't hesitate. "Yes, I will." And with that, the path ahead became clear The Vathrians had accepted him, but the real test of his strength, his courage, and his wisdom, his conviction, was yet to come.